Hey Warpugs, Mr. Illustrated recently put out SCP-001 When Day Breaks, the IKEA episode part 2. Guys, it's been a bit since we last went forth into Sweden to see the furniture, but now that we're back again, just remember, returns aren't something you want to do, and don't ask the staff for help because they're all pricks. Guys, IKEA. It was one of the first SCPs that I was introduced to. It was one of the first. And it still holds a special place for me. It's one of the funniest ones too, from an outside perspective, until you start looking into it, and then you're like, God, this would really suck. Unless you manage to Mad Max the food court. Because personally, having a food court that replenishes supplies while you get to play Civilization and or War, and then fight the NPCs at the IKEA, I mean, that would be an interesting game. I'm just saying. That would be a very interesting game. Guys, go look for the TVs. All $3,075,000. And then once you get back, we'll be into this. Let's get into it. Guys, all of Mr. Illustrated's links are in the description down below. I have been a fan of this series since it first came out. In fact, the artwork up on the wall comes from this series. I highly recommend you check out Mr. Illustrated's artwork in the description down below, the links. Let's get into it.
Chapter 7 of the SCP Foundation Handbook and Survival Guide.
Oh.
Surviving in an apocalypse heavily depends on what apocalypse you're dealing with. If it's a standard runaway zombie scenario,
Standard runaway zombie scenario. What?
Most SCP Foundation sites will provide more than adequate protection from harm. If it's a more virulent and airborne strain, you might want to limit yourself to whatever adjunct building you're currently occupying. And if it's a Night of the Living Dead scenario where everyone who dies rises as undead, you'll need to enact new stringent protocols and sleeping arrangements. But what do you do when reality itself is wrong? We can't get into specifics here because we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. But there are numerous anomalies that promise to completely rewrite the rules of reality. At that point, assuming you are capable of surviving at all in this new world, you may find yourself looking for safety. We highly recommend that you identify and become familiar with any local extra-dimensional spaces whose documentation you have access to. Protocol 9 Foxtrot Alpha is our effort to catalogue and define extra-dimensional spaces that are under the Foundation's purview. The primary and currently identified primary extra-dimensional space available to the average SCP employee is handled under Project Waterloo. You'll find more information about Project Waterloo on page 859.
Nice. That's a massive document.
Here we go again.
Jamal squeezed the trigger on his flamethrower and began the process of burning yet another mass of tainted flesh. His hazmat suit combined with a layered hoodie and mask looked like a combination of haphazard and specifically designed. The flesh he was cleaning up screeched and tried to reach for him, but it was a crackling mess on the floor in moments. Jamal continued down the hall of the apartment building, checking each door for flesh. Most of the building had already been emptied out, but he was still coming across pockets of flesh from time to time. The radio on his hip sprang to life, and he heard another voice.
Jamal, what floor are you on?
Up to floor 8. Got a few more apartments to check and then I'll be done.
Alright, when you're done, meet me in the lobby.
He gently massaged his throat and coughed loose some stubborn phlegm. Despite his mask, weeks of being around fire and smoke had not been kind to his lungs.
Gas masks are wonderful, but unless you change out the filters regularly, eventually some stuff does get through.
Or his voice. He wondered if the fire eaters received compensation for this kind of thing in their line of work. Not that it made any difference these days. As Jamal opened the door to the next apartment, the entire floor beneath him heaved upwards with a crack. A giant pink mass of goo sprang from the new hole in the floor, and he fell backwards onto his ass. He lifted the flamethrower, but a pseudopod reached out and grabbed him by the legs. Jamal was rapidly pulled towards the flesh monster. Jamal activated his radio.
Ambush! 8th floor, apartment 17.
On my way!
Jamal was hoisted up into the air and hung over a hole of teeth and melted flesh, surrounded by fractured floorboards.
Hooray!
He aimed at the mass and squeezed the trigger. It screeched and Jamal went flying. He wasn't sure where he'd end up in that moment before he impacted, but he was glad it wasn't going to be inside the screeching, writhing, and burning monster.
That's always a positive.
Chapter 91 of the SCP Foundation Handbook and Survival Guide, codename Waterloo.
SCP-3008 is an anomaly, and we mean that in every sense of the word. SCP-3008 is an IKEA that, once you get lost in it, becomes an extra-dimensional space from which there is little chance of escape. The IKEA in Scottsdale, Arizona that acts as the currently contained iteration of the anomaly was a result of an attempted test design. The people who created it managed to craft what may be the most confusing and difficult to navigate store layout in the history of retail.
Hooray!
Under normal circumstances, this obviously wouldn't be in the Foundation's purview, but I want you to imagine you are 7 years old again.
That's not hard for me to do considering I'm mentally 5.
You're out shopping with your mother, and some toy or some brightly coloured box grabs your attention. You look up, and you realise that you're alone. Your mother was just there, right? But now she's gone. And you aren't just alone, you'll always be alone. You can't accept that, so you go searching, and if you're lucky, you find her again. Retail stores are confusing, eldritch locations for a 7-year-old, but an IKEA is a different story. If you get lost inside any IKEA in the world, you might as well be a 7-year-old again, because you're never getting out. It's not the single location in Scottsdale, that one just has an extra confusing layout. Every IKEA in the world, and perhaps in the multiverse, has the same effect. If you get lost inside, you're truly lost.
Every IKEA in the world? This is truly concerning.
But the Foundation isn't in the business of seeing problems as only problems. Problems are just opportunities. If all of reality is breaking down, or a glitch in the fabric of the universe is threatening to turn you into some mindless monster, find an IKEA. Familiarise yourself with SCP-3008's documentation, and hope you can weather the storm. Worst comes to worst, you'll get to try some interesting food, and see some interestingly named furniture.
Okay.
Eric burst into the room and finished off the screeching mass that had attempted to devour Jamal. They weren't out of the woods yet though, as the nearest IKEA was a few miles down the road. It was starting to seem that this town clear was going to fail. Jamal pulled off his mask and began nursing a nasty bump on his head from when the creature had flung him against the wall. He'd been knocked out briefly, but now he had a pounding headache.
Yeah.
The Foundation's next planned pickup was in 3 days, and until then, the team would need to get back to their base of operations. Eric, the voice on the other end of his radio, walked over to where Jamal lay crumpled on the ground.
You alive?
Yeah. Mamma mia, that fucking hurt.
Was that an ABBA reference?
What?
What can I say? I have taste.
Debatable.
Hey, stop insulting my music choices. I am bleeding.
Oh, it's just a cut. Don't be such a baby.
Oh, you're one to talk. You complained so much after what happened in Oklahoma City.
Eric leaned in.
We said we'd never talk about that.
Oh, right. The part where the flesh monster spent 20 minutes holding you up to the sky, and you didn't turn because the clouds never broke.
Yeah, that.
Jamal stood up. Eric punched him playfully in the arm. The creaking of the floorboards beneath them left both of them unsteady, in every sense of the word. Jamal spoke first.
I think we should go.
Sounds like a
You
plan.
ask?
He showed Eric the broken air filter and cracked eyepiece.
Guess I'm taking point then. Back to base Alpha?
The two nodded in agreement and started down the stairway. Jamal grabbed a dusty scarf from an open suitcase on his descent and wrapped it around his face. As they reached the lobby, the two of them were confronted by a 15-foot wide rolling tube of flesh that sprouted hands and mouths, both of which were lined with teeth.
Delicious.
Eric smiled and hefted his flamethrower.
Looks like Sonny hasn't quite had enough.
Puns.
Jamal shook his head.
Let's just get out of here. It's just gonna keep sending more flesh until we lose.
Nah, let's make it memorable. Try to stay below the smoke.
Fire streamed out and into the monster. It rolled quickly in their direction regardless. Eric dodged a pseudopod covered in jagged teeth, and Jamal rolled backwards. The building around them, already beginning to spark from the earlier fight, was now quickly becoming an inferno, which was good, because the monster was screaming in pain, rather than trying to monologue in a creepy voice about how they should just give in.
Yeah, cut off the monologuing. It'll be fine.
But it was also not great for their own health. The heat and smoke was starting to become a problem, but the monster blocked the main exit even as it burned alive. Eric was the first to retreat, moving back down the hall and towards the apartment building laundry room. Jamal followed suit, the narrow hall blocking the monster's current configuration from being able to follow, though it still reached out sharp tentacles in their direction. Jamal pointed at the door behind them.
The fire exit!
Eric nodded and ran for the door, pressing into it. He found himself in a dark alley and caught his breath. Jamal followed shortly afterwards. He pulled his scarf further up and his hoodie down to better cover his face, and the two began to run up the alleyway and back towards Base Alpha, with the trapped monster screaming at them from inside the burning building. The two didn't stop running until they reached Base Alpha, and the monster chasing them, trapped though it was, had its own allies in the shadows following them. Chapter 92 of the SCP Foundation Handbook and Survival Guide.
Okay.
In the event of a worldwide disruption in reality, the kind that results in the death of most of our leadership, or turns the world itself into an eldritch location, you may have to judge the level of threat. The inside of an IKEA is always an eldritch location to some
The shade for the Swedish furniture company, my god.
degree, and act as a pocket universe that will protect you from the outside world. But it absolutely comes with its own risks. It's like trying to get two wild animals to fight. Sometimes the bear turns out to be on your side. Sometimes you get eaten. But in the end, if IKEA employees can be provoked by whatever you're fleeing from, you will likely become either not a priority, or even an ally in the eyes of the anomaly. To that end, we have established a listing of IKEAs that can be used as a base of operations in the event of worldwide reality disruption. You can find those in Appendix A, Section B, Subsection BA. Go inside, obey the rules, and don't be hostile or disruptive to the employees. If you can provoke whatever you're fleeing from to attack the employees, great.
Yay!
If not, keep the exit door in sight at all times. If you lose sight of that, you're lost to the anomaly forever. It's not impossible to escape from an IKEA after becoming lost, but it is exceedingly rare.
Corporal Simmons swore as the faceless staff member moved its bishop, putting his king in checkmate. His fellow team members cheered and jeered at Simmons as he reluctantly flicked his king over, all the while noting his disbelief at how something without eyes can be so good at chess. He reached to shake the thing's hand it had offered him, and then left the chair for another team member to try their luck. Base Alpha, which was set up just inside the lobby of the Illinois IKEA, was humming with activity. Mobile Task Force's Customer Service, Firehammer, and Dancing Queen had their own small subsections of the floor space set up for their own use. Customer Service was an MTF formed out of survivors pulled from various IKEAs throughout the world. Firehammer was a blend of fire eaters and hammer-down soldiers. They were in charge of general security and conducting the more high-risk missions. Dancing Queen was responsible for ensuring that the people using IKEAs to base out of had food, water, ammunition, and proper protection from the sun.
It's so odd seeing the IKEA employees, understanding that there's a threat, understanding that there's a problem, and going with it. It's just odd to me, but I like it. I like the twist here.
Various groups were relaxing slightly, as only one mission was currently underway. Pickup would be happening in less than a day. The team's purpose had been to clear nearby buildings in an effort to retake a small containment building previously used to house safe-class SCP objects. Right now, as everyone relaxed, various faceless IKEA employees guarded the doors for them. The employees had long ago become allies of the SCP Foundation, for lack of a better word, in their extreme vigilance against the sun-tainted flesh from outside. It had long been theorized that once a single IKEA employee had been dragged into the sun and turned, that the whole IKEA entity considered the sun its enemy, somehow, and that it would never stop fighting until it snuffed out the sun entirely, which left the scientist who made that initial logical leap a bit unsettled.
A little bit.
At lunch, he'd posed the question, who would win? 1 billion IKEA employees or the sun?
The sun.
And everyone looked at him weird. He kept quiet after that. Jamal and Eric arrived at the IKEA in a dead sprint. The monsters that had been shadowing them had long since abandoned any sense of stealth, opting instead to herd them towards whatever they considered safety. The sun-tainted flesh hunted less like an animal and more like a man, but the vast majority of people who'd learned that fact didn't survive to report to others. The two survivors here had been through dozens of fights and hunts with the flesh, winning most, barely surviving the others. Whatever was going on here in Illinois though, the flesh was acting more predatory than normal. Hostile, in fact. As the moon vanished behind the clouds, Jamal saw a dozen employees emerge from the shadows in front of the entrance. They formed a line and stared down the flesh. One cracked his knuckles, while another began stretching his arms. Two at the center moved aside and beckoned them both through. Jamal needed no encouragement and sprinted, Eric in tow, through the open doors. He wondered if the flesh knew something he didn't, if some great cataclysm was coming, that the world was ending a second time. Something had inspired the flesh to come here, to try and see where the survivors were taking shelter, to attack it with everything they had. But why now? He had exactly 0 seconds to communicate that to his allies as he was pulled into the building. The thump of the flesh rolling end over end in their direction was like thunder. The front door smashed open as the flesh forced its way inside. The entrance zone became a beehive of activity. Everyone began grabbing flamethrowers and taking up firing positions. Row after row of faceless staff began lining up in front of the barricades. As the flesh approached, a line would break formation and leap onto the flesh from all angles. A lone flesh humanoid broke free and lunged for Jamal, who fell backwards, scrambling to get up his flamethrower. But before he could find the trigger, a lone staff member charged forward from its line and tackled it to the ground.
Nice.
Jamal turned and began crawling backwards as more staff ran past him. He looked through the many legs to see the acting commander grab the arm of a particularly broad staff member wearing a supervisor badge on its shirt.
Is the flesh a Karen?
He couldn't make out what was being shouted, but saw the commander pointing from the shelves that flanked the entrance to the encroaching flesh. The supervisor nodded, gestured at a few fellow faceless colleagues, and they quickly disappeared into the store. A jet of searing flame sent Jamal back to the floor as the fire eaters began approaching the flesh, flamethrowers scorching the mass, driving it backwards.
Nice.
One of them stopped to help Jamal up.
Saving your backside again, are we, Jamal? That's twice now, lad. Flesh is gonna get you if you're not more careful. Now fall back and support Bravo. We'll handle this.
Yep.
Jamal turned away to try and find Eric, but it was hopeless. There was too much going on to distinguish one person from another. And then it happened. Something strange. Something he'd never felt or heard before. Light. Heat. It was 11 p.m. and suddenly the sun was up. Everyone averted their eyes, but it didn't transform them.
Nuke.
Jamal felt himself be picked up by the blast wave of the exploding nuclear bomb and thrown back into IKEA. Jamal went unconscious as he landed in a nearby box with unassembled tables inside, and he did not wake up. Hours later, a badly scorched, limping supervisor appeared and gestured down at Jamal's body. It was carefully removed from the debris by 2 staff members, carried towards a trolley, and carefully laid down alongside several other former defenders. Turning its head, the supervisor observed several more fully laden trolleys dragged by scorched staff members approaching. They found the rest of the dead and disappeared further into the shelves. This part of the store was closed forever. Chapter 8 of the SCP Foundation Handbook and Survival Guide.
Dude, every single time there's a point of light, there's a brighter flashlight, apparently.
When all is said and done.
One thing that should be absolutely clear about the world is that not everyone gets a happy ending. We become lost, we lose people we love, we die. Nothing in this handbook is going to prevent your death or the death of those you love. But if we're lucky, you can sometimes put the end off for a while. That's the point of the SCP Foundation. Not everyone gets their happy ending, but we can certainly try. Sometimes a triumph is a temporary victory. Sometimes a step forward is actually a step back. This shouldn't trouble you beyond the short term. It shouldn't depress you. This is a world of wonder and magic. Beautiful things can happen here, but never become comfortable. The end comes for us all. Remember our motto: we die in the dark so that you can live in the light. Try to enjoy yourself along the way.
There you go.
You can support me on Ko-Fi and check out this video for another great story. Big thanks to Sumerian for writing this one and to my patron guest voices. Big up the patrons and channel members, and special thanks to Viger, Zehex, and Andre Bashert.
It's the one true thing about all good fiction. Of course, there is good fiction that doesn't follow this, but your characters, your protagonists, in order to feel real, some of them just have to. I was kind of psyched to see the IKEA staff basically fighting the flesh, but at the same time, it's no big surprise that a nuke takes them out. It's no big surprise. It's also no big surprise the rest of the IKEA wasn't blown up because the IKEA is huge. Very well done. Great voice acting. And once again, Mr. Illustrated's art style is flat out wonderful. Like I said, that up there, the centerpiece to everything up there, that is from Mr. Illustrated. I highly recommend that you guys go check it out. Get yourself something. Why not? Until next time, though, Warpugs, check the links in the description below. Join as a member of Patreon for early access. And check down below in the links. See if you go by my store with Fourth Wall and pick yourself up a shirt. I'll catch you Warpugs next time.